After returning home from our week-long honeymoon, I heard strange noises coming from inside the house. I was worried someone might have broken in. Did you hear that? Maybe someone's in the house. Should we call the police? I asked my husband, but he didn't seem worried at all. It's fine, he said calmly. He walked inside while reassuring me, and I quickly followed him. To my surprise, I found my mother-in-law, Kelly, and sister-in-law, Jo, inside. I was relieved they weren't burglars, but I was confused about why they were there. Apparently, they offered to look after the house while we were away, so Alex gave them a key. I thought they would leave after we came back. It's getting late. Don't you think you should go home? I asked them. We just want to relax today, they replied. They didn't leave. Instead, they took over the living room and even started showering without asking. I thought they would leave the next day, but when I came home from work, they were still there. I couldn't take it anymore, so I asked Alex to tell them to leave. His response was, "We all live together now. If you don't like it, you can leave." He told me to leave instead, so I grabbed only the essentials and left. My name is Izzy, and I'm a 29-year-old magazine editor. I met my husband, Alex, 3 years ago, through a friend. I hadn't been in many relationships before him, but I liked his dependable, confident personality. He said I love you first, and after 3 years of dating, he proposed, and we got married. When we were looking for a house and wedding venue, he handled everything smoothly, and I really enjoyed living with him. But my mother-in-law, Kelly, and sister-in-law, Jo, were a constant problem. Alex's father passed away 10 years ago, so it was just Kelly and Jo, who's 27, in his family. I was nervous about getting along with them, especially since we didn't spend much time together before we got married. But after we got married, they started bothering me more. Kelly called me almost every day, asking for more money. "Can you give me a little extra allowance? I can't live on what you give me, just $200 more would help," she'd ask. I would tell her to ask Alex instead, since he handled the finances. She'd say things like, "You're probably wasting money, that's why you can't give me more. You need to take care of your in-laws or bad things will happen to you." She also asked me to visit her more, do her chores, and send her favorite foods every month. Meanwhile, Jo would show up at my house uninvited. She'd pop in and say, "I was in the area, so I thought I'd stop by. Is dinner ready yet? I'm hungry." Then she'd just sit on the couch until it was ready and leave after eating. I told her many times to give me notice before she came and not to come so often, but she didn't listen. It was hard to be harsh with her because she was Alex's sister. When I told Alex about my frustrations with Kelly and Jo, he told them to stop bothering me, but things didn't change. Then, 6 months into our marriage, Alex and I decided to take a honeymoon. After a week of enjoying Europe and relaxing, we returned home and heard strange noises coming from inside. I was scared it was a burglar. "Did you hear that? Maybe someone's inside. Should we call the police?" I asked Alex, but he seemed calm. "It's fine," he said, and walked into the house. I hurried after him and found Kelly and Jo inside. "Oh, you're back. Did you bring me the bracelet I asked for?" "No, it was too expensive," I replied. While I stood there, they were chatting like nothing was wrong. "Why are you guys here?" I asked. "Are you saying we're a bother? This house is empty, and anyone could break in. We came over to keep it safe. You should be grateful." They said they were looking after the house while we were gone, so Alex gave them a key. I told him he should have talked to me about it, but he said they asked him at the last minute, and he didn't have time to discuss it with me. I decided to let it go, thinking that at least the house was safe. However, when I looked around, I saw their things everywhere. Jo had so many clothes in the closet that the rest were piled up on the floor. The living room was a mess with clothes, bags, remote controls, and comic books thrown around. It looked like they had taken over the house. I was exhausted after the long flight, and frustrated by the mess I had to clean up, but that wasn't the real problem. I thought Kelly and Jo would leave after we came back, but they didn't. "It's getting dark. Don't you think you should go home now?" I asked them. "We just want to relax today," they answered. Not only did they not leave, but they took over the living room and even started showering without asking. They completely made themselves at home. I thought they would leave the next day, but the morning came and they were still there. When I came home from work, they were still there. I told them it was time for them to leave. "We're family. You don't have to worry about us. Just act like we're not here," they said. They refused to leave, even though they told me not to worry. I was the one who was doing all the cooking, cleaning, and laundry. I didn't feel comfortable at all. If I didn't force them to leave, they would have stayed forever. So I decided to ask Alex to tell them to leave. While I was cleaning my room waiting for him to come home, I noticed one of my perfume bottles was missing. It was a limited edition, no longer sold, and it cost over $300. I had been using it carefully, little by little. I was worried and asked Kelly about it, but she didn't even know I had the perfume. When I asked Jo, she said, "Oh, I have it," and pulled the bottle out of her bag. She gave it back to me, but it was almost empty. I had used it very carefully, and there was still more than 6% left. "It smells nice, right?" My friend liked it, so I lent it to her, she said. Without any apology, I lost my temper. "Why did you use it without asking? That's theft. Didn't you learn that stealing is wrong?" She replied, "What's the big deal? I just borrowed it for a bit. Why are you freaking out? If you only borrowed it, then give me back what you used." I said, "Fine, but it's already used, so I'll give you half the money," she offered. "I don't want your money, I want the same perfume back," I snapped. "You're so petty, it's just perfume, I know the brand too, it shouldn't be so expensive." She looked up the price on her phone, and when she saw how much it was, she was shocked. "Wow, why is it so expensive? You spent $300 on perfume? If it's so valuable, why didn't you protect it better?" She seemed upset with me after seeing the price. "It's important to me, so I only used it inside the house," I explained. I never expected to have a relative who would come into my room and use my things without asking. While we were arguing about the perfume, Alex came home. "What's going on?" he asked. "Listen, Alex, I only used a little perfume, and she called me a thief," Jo complained loudly in the living room. I left her there and went to talk to Alex in the bedroom. I told Alex I had run out of patience and wanted him to ask them to leave. "Don't get worked up over something so small," he said dismissively. "And by the way, I haven't told you yet, but they're going to live with us now," Alex added casually. I was stunned. My mouth dropped open at his unexpected reply. My mom's house was old, and it was falling apart. She had been thinking about repairing it or moving out. We had extra rooms, so we thought she could move in and save money. I never imagined Alex would decide this without even talking to me first. "Why didn't you discuss this with me? This is our house too. I'm paying the mortgage too, you know," I said, frustrated. "Don't blame me, my mom decided to sell her house, and anyway, we're living together now, so if you don't like it, you can leave." Alex had made this decision on his own and even told me to leave. It felt like he didn't care about me at all. That was the moment I started to feel like I was losing my feelings for him. "I understand," I said, keeping my calm. I packed my things into a carry-on bag. Alex didn't try to stop me. Instead, he called me immature for running away after a fight and walked out of the room. Kelly and Jo stood by, grinning at me as I packed. Once I left, they locked the door behind me. I wasn't planning to go back and didn't feel anything about it anymore. I checked into a hotel and called my boss to take a few days off. During those days, I looked for an apartment and told my parents I had separated from Alex. They were shocked and asked me what I was going to do. I told them I was going to get a divorce. Alex texted me once, "When you're ready to apologize, you can come back." Mom and Jo both said they would forgive you. When I called him about the divorce, he was reluctant at first. "You're really divorcing me over something like this? You just need to deal with it a bit longer," he said, but when he saw I was serious, he finally agreed. The divorce process moved quickly, and within 6 months, it was final. I wanted to get rid of him as quickly as possible, so we worked out the property division, and I gave him the house. We had been married less than a year before getting divorced. My friends and coworkers were concerned and asked what had happened. At first, I just shrugged it off, not wanting to talk about it, but this time, I was so done with everything that I told them everything. They were shocked and said, "That's terrible, I'm sorry you had to go through that." Their support made me feel a little better. After I started living alone, I threw myself into work. I took on more projects than usual and even helped out my coworkers who were overwhelmed. My boss was worried about me, but I found that staying busy helped me block out the painful memories. 5 months after the divorce, Alex called me. I had left most of my things behind, so I thought he might be calling about that. He started by asking what I was doing and if I was living alone. It seemed strange since he was usually direct. I didn't want to waste my time, so I asked him straight out what he wanted. He said he wanted to get back together. I had no intention of getting back with him, so I said, no, and tried to end the call. But he rushed to stop me. "Wait, There's something I didn't tell you. What? I replied. I'm busy, so hurry up. Can you lend me some money? I'm struggling to pay the mortgage. I knew it used to be paid by both of us, so I understood it must be hard for him to handle it alone, but I also knew it wasn't a huge amount he suddenly couldn't cover. Alex explained that he had been expecting a raise a few months ago, but it never came through. He was also told that, based on his current performance, there wouldn't be any chance for a raise in the future. So, he decided to change jobs, thinking it would be easier to find one with better pay, but the reality was, he could only find one that paid less, and he still hadn't been able to switch jobs yet. Despite his struggles, I had no intention of lending him any money. I told him not to contact me anymore. Then, he said something I wasn't expecting. You're still single, right? No one would want a divorcee who's getting older. You should come back to me. I just replied, no, thank you, and hung up the phone. At that moment, I couldn't understand how I had fallen for him in the first place. I felt so disappointed in my own judgment. After the divorce, both Alex and his family continued to bother me. I learned from their conversations that they believed Alex was making a good salary. They thought that because we bought a new house and had a big wedding, he was well off. But when Alex refused to increase their allowance, they started to blame me, thinking I was the one stopping him. When I left, they thought they could live a more comfortable life, but Alex's salary was much less than they had imagined. When they realized that their expectations were falling apart, they started calling me in a panic. They assumed men made more money than women, but in reality, my salary was higher than Alex's. I wanted to block them all, but I was worried Alex might show up at my workplace, so I answered his calls a few times. Every time, he complained about Kelly and Joe spending too much money. He said he had run out of savings and that they had started working part-time jobs, but they were still struggling because of their spending habits. It was always about money. I decided that the next time he called, I'd tell him I didn't have any money either, hoping that would make him stop. One day, as expected, he called again, saying, I need a loan. I can't pay the mortgage this month. I answered, actually, I'm going to quit my job soon. I've spent most of my savings, so I need you to lend me some money. If you think I'm lying, you can check with someone at work. He simply said, I see, and hung up the phone. After that, he stopped calling. When I told my friend about it, she explained that Alex's situation was even worse than I knew. He had taken a lower-paying job, and most of his salary went to the mortgage. On top of that, Joe had gotten involved with the manager of her part-time job, who was married. His wife found out and filed a lawsuit against her. Joe initially claimed she didn't know he was married, but the evidence showed she was aware and still pursued him. The manager divorced his wife, and Joe had to pay a large compensation fee. She lost her job and her friends after the scandal became public. Now, Alex's family was struggling to pay the mortgage and the debt from the lawsuit. It seemed like they were living in a cycle of debt. Kelly often complained about her friends having grandchildren while her own kids were still single and poor. Alex, meanwhile, whined to a friend that they fought every day. He was upset that he was single now, and that no women were paying attention to him. He had lost weight and looked rough, aged far beyond his years. His friend just rolled her eyes, tired of hearing him complain. I learned that the same friend who had introduced Alex and me was the only person Alex still had contact with. She felt responsible for our failed marriage and oddly enjoyed hearing about his problems. She continued to stay in touch with him, partly to keep him away from me. As for me, I've been doing much better. I recently launched a web magazine with a friend from university. I left my old job and used most of my savings to start the company. It's a small startup, and I have to take on a lot of tasks myself, but I love the challenge. I used to be intimidated by starting new things, but after everything I've gone through, I'm much more confident in handling obstacles. I also met someone new through work. He respects my boundaries and gives me the space I need. Thanks to him, I've come to realize that Alex wasn't the decisive, reliable leader I thought he was just selfish. For a while after my divorce, I was afraid that I could never marry or have a boyfriend again, but now, I'm looking forward to the future with a more positive outlook, and I'm excited to embrace my new happiness.